He lost the fleet admiral position. He lost his leg. He lost, seemingly, all direction in his life. And yet, out of every character left standing for One Piece's final stretch, Oda chose him to share the same panel with the emperors, with Aimu, and with the world government. Aokiji isn't lost. Aokiji is waiting. And what if I told you that, since the day he left the Marines, every single decision Kuzan has made has had one purpose, making sure Monkey D. Luffy reaches the One Piece? Let's line up the facts before we go deeper. Kuzan, the Aokiji, was born nearly 50 years ago in the kingdom of Vespa on the Sorbet archipelago. No family, no structure. The Marines were the first place his life made sense. He was so talented he skipped past standard training stages and sought out Garp himself, the hero of the Marines, as his mentor. The two trained the hard way, relying on raw strength instead of devil fruit powers. It was there, alongside Garp, that Kuzan developed what he himself called burning justice, chasing down evil with everything he had, but never sacrificing an innocent life along the way. That ideal collapsed at Ohara, when the world government ordered a buster call against the Archaeologists' Island. The original mission called for evacuating civilians and targeting only those who had broken the law by studying the Void Century. Sakazuki went further and ordered the evacuation ship itself sunk. Kuzan objected openly, but he watched that atrocity get rewarded by the government's top brass. From that point on, burning justice turns into lazy justice, the belief that it's rarely worth fighting for anything. So you might as well put in the bare minimum. Years later, when Sengoku retires and names Kuzan his successor for Fleet Admiral, the elders veto the choice because of how he handled Ohara. The standoff gets settled in a duel at Punk Hazard against Sakazuki. 10 days of fighting. Kuzan loses his leg and loses the position. He leaves the Marines, and to everyone's surprise, resurfaces years later as a member of Blackbeard's crew. Up to this point, the fandom's default read is simple: a disillusioned man who switched sides, but there's a detail almost nobody bothered to connect. Go back to Ohara with me for a second. Kuzan used his power to freeze Jaguar D. Saul, the giant deserter protecting the archaeologists. Right as the island was being destroyed. The name of that technique isn't an accident. Ice time capsule. That's not an attack meant to kill. It's an attack meant to preserve. And that's exactly what happened. The flames melted the ice. Saul survived with severe burns and escaped with a group of giants, carrying with him the books the archaeologists had thrown into the lake before they died. That group ended up in Elbaf. Years later, in Water 7, Kuzan tells Nico Robin that Ohara was completely destroyed. Back then, we read that as a metaphor, Robin being the last living trace of that island. But with the recent confirmation that Saul is alive and teaching in Elbaf, that line carries different weight now. Kuzan knew. He always knew Saul survived, and here's the link that changes everything. Elbaf is home to giants who worship Nika, the sun god. The legend is passed down generation to generation as a prophecy that Nika will one day return to bring dawn to the world. Vegapunk has already confirmed that the central figure of the Void Century was that very sun god. Saul lived immersed in that culture for over 20 years, and Saul was Kuzan's best friend. It's practically impossible that legend never reached him. That explains something that never fully clicked before. Why burning justice turned into lazy justice right after Ohara. The simplest reading is that he simply gave up. But there's another reading. He stopped believing justice would come from the Marines because he'd started believing it would come from somewhere else. From the dawn Nika would one day bring. This pattern already has precedent in One Piece. Bartholomew Kuma became a government weapon, joined the 7 warlords, sacrificed his own identity, all while secretly searching for Nika. When he discovered Nika was Luffy, every earlier decision suddenly made sense. Kuzan fits that exact mold. He isn't standing beside Blackbeard. He's positioned there. Now let's build the case, piece by piece. After Ohara, Kuzan tracked Nico Robin from a distance for 20 years. She'd been framed by Spandine as a criminal capable of single-handedly bringing down entire organizations, a lie that circulated the world for 2 decades. Repeated even by rank-and-file soldiers in Alabasta. When Kuzan discovers she's sailing with the Straw Hats, he doesn't move to arrest her. He travels to Long Ring Long Land, repeats the same accusation to the crew and watches. He hands a golden Den Den Mushi to Spandine, enables a buster call, hands Robin over to CP9, and waits. What happens next is the answer he was waiting for. The Straw Hats declare war on the world government to save a single crewmate. They storm Annie's lobby, they defeat CP9, and they rescue Robin from the sentence that had followed her since she was 8 years old. From that moment on, Kuzan has his confirmation. Robin was never the monster the government described. She found a place where she belonged in the crew captained by Garp's own grandson. He doesn't leave the Marines right away, because Sengoku was still in command, which meant the institution still had someone trustworthy at the top. The break only comes after Marineford, when the elders reject his promotion and force him into a duel with Sakazuki. Losing that duel, for him, also meant refusing to serve under an absolute justice that sacrifices innocence. The same logic behind Ohara, and that's where joining Blackbeard's crew starts to make sense. A lot of fans bet that Kuzan is a spy for Sword or for the Revolutionary Army. Neither one fits. Sword is already known within the Marines itself. Other Marines mention its existence openly, so if Kuzan were infiltrated by them, Sakazuki would already know. And the revolutionaries have never shown any interest in spying on Blackbeard. Their target is the world government, not pirates. The real answer shows up in the conversation between Kuzan and Teach. In chapter 1081, Teach says that in his crew, there are no principles, only shared interests. And he adds that Kuzan spent his whole life serving an institution, and now he's free to choose what he wants to do. That question is the central piece of this whole theory. Kuzan never bought into Teach's worldview, and Teach never cared, because all he wants is usefulness. But Doflamingo himself, crossing paths with Kuzan at Punk Hazard, sums up what's really at stake in a single line. A lost man's eyes don't look the same as a determined man's eyes. And what Doflamingo saw was determination. When he runs into Smoker, Kuzan says, "I'm still me." He didn't switch sides. He switched position, and the information he went looking for there is the same information that decides the final race, the road poneglyphs. Before Vegapunk's speech, that knowledge circulated almost exclusively in the underworld territory and Admiral could never access, but that a commander under an emperor moves through freely. Here's the detail almost nobody notices at first. Blackbeard's commanders are called the Titanic Captains, and Kuzan's power is ice, the same element that sank the Titanic. Could be a coincidental name. Or it could be one of Oda's classic signatures. Kuzan is the iceberg that will sink the Titanics exactly when the right moment comes. There are at least 2 recent events that support this. First, the kidnapping of Charlotte Pudding on Cacao Island. The obvious read is that Kuzan was helping Teach get someone who could read the poneglyphs. But think about it, if Pudding hadn't been available, who's the next obvious target? Nico Robin. By handing over Pudding, Kuzan may, in practice, be pulling Robin out of the crew's crosshairs. Second, the confrontation with Garp at Hakanosu follows the exact same pattern as Ohara. Kuzan freezes his own mentor, but doesn't kill him. Garp survives just like Saul survived. Ice time capsule remains, to this day, a preservation technique. Never an execution one, placed side by side with Garp the past, his mentor, the generation that already played its part, and Luffy the future. The Dawn Nika promises to bring Kuzan chooses the future. If this reading is right, Kuzan's role in the endgame starts to come into focus. He's inside the most dangerous crew in the world, with access to the network that knows where the road poneglyphs are and who the man marked by flames is. The moment Teach finally locates that information, Kuzan is the most logical candidate to leak it directly or indirectly to the Straw Hats. That would put Kuzan right at the center of the Elbaf arc and the final race to the One Piece, aligned with the same group of characters who sacrificed decades of their lives waiting for Nika's return. Kuma, who carried that weight all the way to the end. Saul, who preserved forbidden knowledge for 20 years. And now Kuzan, lying in wait inside the very crew threatening to get their first. It also reinforces something about the nature of the world government and IMU. The more people with a history inside the system, a former warlord, a former admiral, each in their own way choosing to betray that structure from within, the clearer it becomes that absolute justice was never as solid as it looked, and it puts Luffy in an even more central position. He has no idea, but he's being quietly protected and watched by people who already paid a steep price inside the very system he's fighting. Put the pieces together, the nickname of a technique that never kills, the friendship with a giant surrounded by the legend of Nika, the quiet obsession with Robin, the ironic name of the Titanic captains next to an ice user. And the question Teach asked without realizing he was, without meaning to, freeing the very agent who might help bring him down. None of these pieces, on their own, prove anything. Together, they draw a pattern that's hard to ignore. In my reading, Oda has been building this thread since Ohara, an arc that, at first glance, seemed to only be about Robin's past, but may have quietly planted Kuzan's fate as well. And if this theory is right, the moment it gets confirmed in the manga is going to completely rewrite how we look at every single appearance Kuzan has made since he left the Marines. If this theory holds up, it changes how we read every scene with Kuzan going forward. But I want to know what you think. Do you think Oda's been planting this since Ohara, or is this too much of a coincidence to be true? Drop your theory in the comments. And if you want to understand why Magellan might also be coming back into the story soon, the next video is linked right here.